Hey guys, Tactical here. Today I'm going to be going over the changes to Root 2's Smite Slayer League Starter. Honestly, the principle of today's video is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The build already functions insanely well, but there are some adaptations that can be made in the new league. On top of that, I'd like to showcase the foil crafting with some examples, rather than just talking about it. No 10 minutes of BSing, no fluff, let's get into it. First and foremost, explosive concoction damage has been nerfed by, on average, about 33%. This is a huge nerf, and originally I proclaimed that the skill was dead. However, the skill heavily outperformed everything else for leveling, and the fact that it could get to 2 stones with 0 gear meant that it was already strong for zeroed investment. Now it means that you'll need at least a 5 link if you choose to continue your progression with the build, or you can unveil +2 projectiles or AoE and craft the remaining one on your helmet. I now have some tech for improving the clear. There's a Flask mastery that grants 100% increased flash charges gained, provided that you kill an enemy that's affected by an elemental ailment. With the built-in fire damage, alongside the 35% chance for your hits to ignite from the fire mastery wheel, on top of the 20% chance to shock and ignite small wheel from primeval force, most monsters you kill will grant you 100% increased flash charges. Awesome. Why do we care about this? Well, I sat down for a bit and calculated out some averages with the level 20 skill gem damage. The gem, baseline, just does 33% less damage. We can assume that it's going to be 33% worse at all gem levels. Well, it was already turbo outperforming the competition, so it's going to be kind of like Armor Crema, or like Firestorm, in the same way that it's a good skill for campaign and it just kind of falls off in red maps, except not quite. See, if the gem consumes flash charges, namely Topaz or Sapphire flash charges, it gains more damage than before. Unfortunately, because the base gem did so much damage itself that if you were just using a Topaz or Sapphire Flask alone, the skill is either 6% worse or 9% worse if you were using a Topaz or Sapphire Flask before the patch. Sad. But if the skill consumed both a Topaz and a Sapphire Flask before the patch, and you use the skill gem at level 20, and you continue to use a Topaz and a Sapphire Flask after the patch, the gem is actually 6% stronger than before. It actually got buffed if you used it the intended way of consuming charges. In fact, if you just use Econk for mapping before, and you weren't using either one of the flasks before, it now does 89% more damage. But I also think that this number is a little irrelevant, since a lot of the time we weren't doing that. In my opinion, you were always going to use a Topaz and a Sapphire Flask. TLDR, if you're not paying attention, Econk's nerfed by 33%. When you use a Topaz or Sapphire Flask, it does more damage than the last patch. 89% more if you weren't using them, and 6% more if you were. Great. What does this mean for us? Well, what this means is that since we can't sustain the Flask with 100% uptime, because we're not a Pathfinder, we're just a Slayer, it means that our single target is going to be noticeably worse. On top of that, we can't guarantee that every time we throw our Flask, we'll even be able to consume Flask anyways. Well, with a little bit of tech, we kind of can. Using an Enkindling Orb on a Topaz and Sapphire Flask to roll increased maximum charges, and then rolling the prefix to have increased maximum charges, this allows us to get all the way up to 145 max charges on the skill. Cool. Remember that we are throwing 6 projectiles, so we're consuming 6 flash charges every time we attack. We never actually use the flask, so it's just constantly gaining the benefit of increased maximum charges from the Enkindling Orb. Again, I repeat, do not actually press the Sapphire Topaz Flask. Unless you're fighting a monster that does that kind of elemental damage type, I guess you could use them, but let's be honest, you're probably not going to be doing that. And remember the Flask Master we talked about earlier? With 100% increased flash charges gained, we can guarantee that, while clearing maps, we're generally always going to gain 100% increased flash charges. Well, if we take Careful Conservationist, taking the small nodes before it gives us 20% increased flash charges. So now we either gain 20% or 120% more flash charges gained per monster kill, depending on if they're affected by an ailment or not. Unfortunately, with Precise Technique, we never actually crit, so we can't gain more charges from Careful Conservationist. Hey streamer, if we're not gaining the benefit of Careful Conservationist, there's another flask wheel down below, near point blank, that gives 45% increased duration of flasks. Why not take this? I'm glad you asked, your viewer who definitely asked this. Well, Careful Conservationist actually reduces flash charges used by 10%. Econk throws 1 projectile by default, Multi-Shot increases our projectiles by 1, and Greater Volley increases it by 4. In total, we throw 6 flasks per use. If you didn't know, the reduced flash charges used actually works for concoction skills. This brings the average use from 6 down to 5.4. Well, the game can't consume a decimal, but it kind of understands it. To demonstrate this, I threw my flask 9 different times. Without the node, it always consumed 6 charges. Makes sense, 6 projectiles, 6 charges. With 10% reduced charges, we throw on average around 5.25, 5.375, and 5.25 charges. Now, I only threw the flask 27 different times. I'm sure if you throw it 1,000 more times, you get different numbers. But I'm already 2 hours deep into answering the question, is Econk still good? And the answer is yes. However, I would not use it for bossing. If you walk into your quest eater and Exarch, the damage is bad, well, it is what it is. At least the mapping feels alright. Okay, with that out of the way, what about the endgame? Well, again, Smite Slayer worked just fine last patch, especially once you got a weapon. How do we make a weapon? Same as last patch, Cold Essence for flat damage, look for attack speed and crit chance. Then craft, hits can't be evaded. For a much better weapon, fracture the cold damage from the essence, and use a Zeal Essence for attack speed until you hit base crit chance. You'll obviously have to null off the other mods. Then multi-mod with hits can be evaded and attacks with weapon penetrate elemental resist. On top of this, you could get really unlucky with the fractures, so keep that in mind.
10 in a row, boys!
For the best possible weapon, you'll still have the fractured cold damage from an essence, you'll still use a Zeal Essence until you land attack speed, and you'll want either crit chance or crit multi. After that, you're going to click Suffixes Cannot Be Changed for 2 Divines, go to the Harvest Bench, and reforge Critical to guarantee either crit chance or crit multi, whichever one you don't have. Then you do Suffixes Cannot Be Changed, and you Veiled Chaos Sword. These are fairly cheap, and the goal is to land Elemental Penetration. Obviously, if you don't have an open prefix, you'll have to blindly annul it. I have lost a couple foils this way. And last, you craft Hits Cannot Be Evaded. There are a lot of different steps you can do to save the foil. If, say, you annul off Elemental Penetration instead, obviously you would just craft Suffixes Cannot Be Changed, and then use another Veiled Chaos Sword. Another perfect example would be if you accidentally removed the crit chance or crit multi with an annul, you could do Suffixes Cannot Be Changed and reforge on the Harvest Bench once again to then get it back. The rest of the gear on the build remains the same. It's mostly uniques in the endgame. For progression, just use the Harvest Bench for the resist that you need. Use Yellow Life Force on Ambulance Rings to get a ton of Chaos Res early on, and I actually find this is pretty profitable on I-84s. I highly recommend watching the original videos by Rutu, but if you're too lazy, then here are some common mistakes. When you swap over to Smite, you need your gems to be leveled up, primarily Smite of Divine Judgment. If you don't have at least level 18 on your main gem, don't swap to Smite of Divine Judgment. On top of this, make sure to have at least the entry level foil. The swap over to Smite means that you will be going crit. Do not keep Precise Technique in the build. Obviously, when you're still Econk, make sure that you have more flat accuracy than you have life. It's easy to check this in your character page. Lastly, Southbound increases your flat damage by a lot and helps freeze a ton, which inherently increases survivability. As frozen monsters, typically just don't do anything. Speaking about survivability, if you buy the wrong Ralakesh, you will suffer immensely. Don't blame me if you messed up and you bought Count as Maximum Power Charges Ralakesh. Do not get scammed by the wrong kind of Ralakesh. These boots can roll 3 different mods between you count as your Maximum Frenzy, Endurance, or Power Charges. You only want the Ralakesh's Impatience with Count as Maximum Endurance Charges. This is relevant as the Maven Belt, Arn's Anguish, converts the endurance charges you gain into brutal charges, which have a 3% chance to deal triple damage, and 10% threshold per brutal charge. It would suck to lose the 7 endurance charges though, as they give 4% fizz and LA damage reduction each. Well, with Ralakesh, you get to keep your endurance charges. If you have 7 endurance charges and use Arn's Anguish and an endurance charge Ralakesh, you keep 28% physical and elemental damage reduction permanently, with no map mod being able to reduce them below your maximum, and you're able to deal triple damage and 70% increased stun threshold. Still follow the progression of uniques of the build: Dark Ray Vectors, Southbound, Heat Shiver, Taming, in that order. Then after that, you can look for going Ralakesh's Impatience with Arn Anguish, then a Yoke. For Anoints, I recommend Divine Judgment if you're poor, Forces of Nature if you have a decent amulet, and for the endgame with Smite, use Silence Ambition. The 40% for the Ray Strike range is very noticeable, and that should be it. I'm probably forgetting something. It's super late. It's the night before League start, and I should have been working on this guide sooner, but unfortunately, I've been too busy killing my guild by wiping to Dementius on Reclear.
Every button.
Just use everything you got.
Get a baby.
It's just meleeing whoever.
Go. Come on, Glocky Walkie!
Oh, no.
I killed us.
Oh, that's right. The changes for this patch. Grab an ES Evasion shield with Shaper Influence. You can also Reforge Influence, or Shaper Exalted Orb, a shield if you need to. And then Reforge Life until it lands Life Gain on block. That's pretty much it. Well, it's my build now. Thanks, Rutu. See ya, loser. If you're watching this video when it goes up, I'm live right now on twitch.tv/killer. Log in, dude.